Hello, 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 welcome back. Yes, it's another day of making monsters, building monsters, and we've selected a froggy-like one today. Yes, that's right, froggies. Always nice to include froggies of some kind, whether it's to play the froggy or to butcher the froggy or blow it up with fire, one of those. So I've put together a poll that you can take part in if you're interested. So feel free to do so and grab some food, some drink, make sure you're comfortable. We get into this. I think this is going to probably take about, 25 minutes to cover, and then I'll be done. So yeah, let's get moving, shall we? So hopefully you're comfortable and we will start. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about frogs, talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and the version of Dungeons and Dragons we're talking about is Shadowdark, which is sort of a modern game and an old school game. It's kind of a mix of the two. And I think it's a great game. So I want to design some monsters, and we're going to design the Bullywug for Shadowdark. Since there aren't any in the core rulebook, it would be nice to actually have access to something like that. So we're going to do that today. I want to show you that process. I want to explain how to do it. I'm going to show you how you can make your own adjustments to it. All that sort of stuff. That is the plan for today. But before I start doing that, I usually ask people, like, how would you go about making the stat block for a particular monster yourself? And so let's ask that question, shall we? So hashtag, how would you build the Bullywug for our stat block? Because it's the stat block we're doing. Stat block for Shadowdark RPG. So that is my question. Put that up there. And for those of you who don't know, this live stream is in conjunction with my efforts as I work on a project with AJ Pickett and Wally DM. That is the intention. So Fred Huber is here, and he's already suggested swamp hoppers and far hoppers. I actually like toadies is not bad. Swamp hoppers is not bad either. I actually think that's a pretty good sort of substitute name. Toadies is not bad, but swamp hoppers, I can live with swamp hoppers. It kind of tells you a lot, doesn't it? Anyway, I have already got a Google document that I've been working on. I started the process already, and I just want to sort of go through and explain why I did certain things. And of course, I might make some changes, because I often do in these live streams. So this document here I'm working on, I've been updating on Patreon and the paid tier. But we're going to be using this table here, which is part of the free tier on Patreon, which shows you how to do the mathematics for your monster. It's sort of a guide for doing that sort of thing. So let's have a look. We're not doing lore today. We're doing, so that's the 31st today of December. 31st of December, last day of 2025 for me. This would be draft, it's probably not draft 26, it's probably a lot more than that, but I'll put 26 since I haven't put a number in there yet. And then we'll go down, and this is the stat block that I've started with. So I've started off with Bullywug. I'll put down Toadfolk. You will let me know, Fred Huber. Fred Huber is a patron and a moderator. Do you think Toadfolk is a good substitute name? I didn't want to put Frogfolk because it was sort of two Fs, but Toadfolk seemed like it was reasonable. Frogfolk, Swamp Hopper. Swamp Hopper. And what else? You had something else. Toadies, didn't you? Toadies. So, yeah, we'll decide on what the name's going to be, I guess, a little bit later. Okay, an amphibious humanoid with a frog-like head and multiple... multicolored. Multicolored, warty skin that excretes defensive poison. Is it poison or is it venom? I know that there's when you're referring to an animal having something in it that is a poison, sometimes you refer to it as a venom, sometimes you refer to it as a poison. And I can't remember the convention for when that applies. So if somebody remembers, let me know. Expert team hunters that feed on everything in swamps. Pretty much, I think that's about right. So our first task is to determine the level of our monster before we do anything else. So I've put down here monster level 1 because there really isn't very much in here that I can kind of work on for this monster, because there isn't obviously a Bullywug. There is I think there's a monster in here that's kind of like their Kurtoa that they have that she's included. She's renamed it something else. I can't remember what they were called. That's probably the closest to what we're talking about here. I think that, are they called old ones or something like that? Old ones or new ones or something, I don't know. I can't remember. If somebody remembers from the core book, you let me know, but for the life of me, I can't. So the core book won't help us very much with regard to this. So I'm going to go and have a look in the Dungeons & Dragons 5e Monster Manual. This is the older one rather than the newer one. Okay, and the Bullywug was challenge rating quarter. So we don't use quarter in Shadowdark. So for me that would mean, okay, it's 1. So I also prefer to actually base my monsters off AD&D or basic D&D, and this is Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the second version. And when I have a look at the stat block, since I looked at that carefully to determine how I would go about doing the Bullywug, they have a hit dice of 1. So I think it should be monster level 1. So that's why I've got it there. Also, in terms of alignment, their alignment is chaotic evil in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. So chaotic and evil is pretty much alignment chaotic for something like Shadowdark. Since there's only 3 alignments, lawful, neutral, and chaotic, I think that's the most sensible one to select. I'm not really terribly interested. Like, you can have a Bullywug that doesn't have a chaotic alignment. That's up to you. You make those modifications yourself. But I'm just making it easy for the game master, dungeon master, to determine that this monster is, although it lives in swamps, it's destructive in nature. And so therefore it's a threat, not probably to just the player characters, but probably to the swamp itself, like a pest. And so I'm going to treat it as such. Now I can't go to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons for the stats for this monster. So I'm going to go back to 5e. And since a lot of the monsters are partially based off 5e, even though the maths is not very good, we can at least get some stuff done here. So they've marked it down as strength 12 for a Bullywug. So that's a modifier of +1, so we'll do that. Dexterity is 12, so that's +1 again, so we'll take that. Constitution is 13, so that's +1 again. So that's nice and simple. We only use the modifiers in Shadowdark rather than the stats, the stat score or ability score. So nice and simple. 7 for intelligence, so that's -2. That's easy. And then wisdom is 10, so that is +0. And then charisma is 7, so that would be -2. So we've got all of that there. So what I want to do is I want to go back and have a look at the level of the monster. Since the level of the monster is 1, if we look at the different sort of range of the low stats and the high stats, you'll notice that the lowest stat you probably would have for a level 1 monster in Shadowdark is -4 up to a +3. And so we fall within those parameters pretty well. Like, so we don't have to do too much. That's nice and easy. Cool. Quite happy about that. The next thing is armor class. Now I can't use armor class from the likes of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons because it's a different system. It's descending rather than going up, and Shadowdark uses higher armor classes better rather than lower armor class. So we have to figure out what it's going to look like. So these things are supposed to wear sort of like a hide armor and have a shield, or leather armor of some kind. And that's in 5e. So I was looking at AD&D to try to decide whether I was going to be giving this creature shields. The shield and the spear seems to be the common weapon that they have, and they do wear some sort of armor. So I was like, okay, so if that's the case, how do I sort of structure them? And since they do potentially wear armor, what sort of armor would they have? Well, I didn't want to give them plates because that's got to swim, so that would make no sense. There's only 3 types of armor in Shadowdark, and there's 1 shield. So it's either going to be leather, chain, or plate mail. In the end, I decided that for a Bullywug and Shadowdark, it's probably sensible, since there's no hide armor, to use leather armor, because it allows for movement, and it would not provide penalties against swimming or stealth, which would circumvent all of the things they're supposed to be good at, like being stealthy and stuff like that. And they do have a +1 to dexterity, so we want to keep those there. And we've given them some special abilities that work to that, work in that way of being able to jump and move around and swim and be sneaky and so forth. So we want to make sure that's all going to work. So leather armor it is, and a shield. Okay, so that is 11 plus your dex modifier. So 11 plus your dex modifier, in this case, that is only a +1. But we also have a shield. So 11 plus 1 is 12. And then if you have a shield, that's +2, so that comes to 14, which is why the armor class is not 15 like 5e, and instead it is 14, because we still have to work on the mechanics of Shadowdark to get our armor class worked out. Because they are wearing armor, leather armor and a shield, we have to include that in brackets because that's the convention in Shadowdark. And then we have to determine how many hit points we have for our monster. Now, as the armor class for a level 1 monster outside the parameters, if we look at the armor class for a level 1 monster, anywhere from a 7 to a 15, and we've got 14. So we're at the top end, but we're not outside of it, so that's all right. Things are working fine. Okay, our expected hit points for this monster is average would be 4, but anywhere between 3 and 8. But there's a formula for figuring out hit points in Shadowdark for monsters, and that is, it is an 8-sided dice. So you take the average of an 8-sided dice, which is 4.5. You multiply that by the monster level, which is 1, so that'll be 4.5 again. You add your constitution modifier, whatever that might be, and in this case, it's 1. So 4.5 plus 1 is 5.5. So we round down, we wind up with hit points of 5. So it's nice and simple. It's not hard. Fits right within the expected range that we wanted. One of the things that you'll notice with making monsters in Shadowdark is hit points, the very exact way of doing it. It's probably the most important number in the game is hit points. And then I would say the next thing is the number of attacks you have and the amount of damage you do. And everything else is probably significantly less important, which seems strange, but it just seems to be how the system is built or works. Okay, attacks. How many attacks do we get if we are level 1? Between 1 and 2 attacks. Okay, that's good to know. So what I've done is I've given them 2 attacks. Either they bite or they use their spear, because I figure if they have no spear, they'll bite. And if they do have a spear, they won't bite, they'll just use their spear. I don't have a problem with the spear being used more than the bite. I've just provided the bite as an option because the bite was stipulated in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons just in case they lost their weapon for whatever reason. Maybe they threw the weapon and they no longer had the weapon in their hand, because you're not going to carry around a whole lot of spears. With a shield, you have a shield and probably 1 spear, right? Unless, of course, you carry multiple spears. I don't know. It seems a little bit strange. Unless you're throwing them, I don't think you would necessarily have more than 1 spear. So this is why we have the bite, just in case they have to engage the bite because they threw the spear. So we're going to go with 2 attacks. So they're quite tough. They're going to be making a lot of attacks. And our next problem that we need to deal with is, what is our attack bonus going to be? Well, it's a level 1 monster. And so we usually have an indication of, for level 1 monsters, 0 to 2 is the attack bonus. So anything between a 1, a 0, 1, or 2. I think it's better to make the attack bonus the same as the monster level. So I have done that. So you'll see the bite is a +1 to hit, and the spear is a +1 to hit. They're the same. Why is that? It's because their dexterity is +1, their modifier is 1, and their strength modifier is 1. So 1 is sort of the go-to for whatever it is, whether it's ranged or distance or thrown, it's going to be a 1. I'm not going to add anything more to that because I don't want to make the monster that tough. I think +1 is perfectly adequate for level 1 monsters. So yeah, they get lots of attacks, but it's on par with most level 1 monsters. Okay, now damage. I did have a look at the amount of damage that the Bullywug does in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and it became clear to me that their weapon was going to do more damage than the likes of the weapon they were carrying. So what I of course did is I did the thing you would normally do, and that is I made sure that the weapon did more damage. But I also have to work with Shadowdark. Like a spear does a certain amount of damage in Shadowdark, and because the spear is listed as 1d6 close and near, I've included close and near in brackets. That's why it's 1d6 for the spear. I have not included poison on the spear or anything like that. The bite itself is just 1d4 because I figure the bite's going to do a lot less damage than the spear will. Okay, so that's how I've sort of structured it, and I don't think 5e was very, very helpful with regard to sort of like separating that, if I remember right. Yeah, we had a bite and we had a spear. Oh no, actually it was pretty much exactly the same as it turns out. Now that I have a quick look, so that's what we have for our attack and our damage for our level 1 Bullywug. So you'll see the number of attacks. We've got 2. The amount of damage is a d4 to a d6, so that's exactly where we need it to be. And then the next thing is, like, how fast does this thing move? I would say it's obviously going to swim because it's a frog-like creature, so I've included in brackets swimming, so it's not going to be slowed by swimming. It shouldn't be. It's a frog-like creature. It's amphibious. And then I had a look at how fast it moved in its movement. It was in AD&D, and it was complicated. It was way too complicated for Shadowdark. So if it was swimming, it was 3. If it wasn't swimming, it was 3. If it was swimming, it was 15, and 9 if it was in armor. So that was just too many things to deal with. So what I did is I just looked at the concept that it's probably moving about near. It doesn't move that quickly, and I just put swim. So movement, near, swim. Nice and simple. That's how I built it. Okay, there's a bunch of different features here. This thing jumps really high and long distances. So I wanted to have a feature that was revolving around that. So I just put down jump. High and long jump near range. That's it. So if they want to jump, they can. Long range or high jump, the distance is near, which is just over 5 feet up to 30 feet, which is a long way. It's big. That's nice and simple. It's got a camouflage ability, which you would expect. And so I've gone with it has advantage on dexterity checks related to hiding and sneaking in swampy environments, because it is more suited to that environment. If it's outside of its environment, it's going to be harder for it to sort of blend in. And I think that's probably the best way to go about it. When I was looking at what they were doing in 5e, they had, what was it? Camouflage, and it was kind of pretty much the same. It's worded slightly different, but it was pretty much the same. And then when I was looking at AD&D, it was pretty clear to me that there needed to be some sort of benefit for being in swampy environments. So, yeah, I just went with that. That was nice and simple. And then poison. Now, the poison is because of AD&D. I was more leaning into AD&D than I was leaning into 5e with this. Because the 5e version doesn't talk about a venom or a poison, but Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the monster does have a feature which talks about sort of poison and venom and being affected by that in some way. And so I wanted to sort of duplicate that to a certain degree. Hence why I have included it. Can I find it? Yeah, it talks about, oh, here, camouflage ability. So, yeah, it mentions that. Stealth, ambush, blah, 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 blah. Savage, Bullywug, large, small. Can I find the section? My eyes aren't going to work. I can't look at this and try to read it with these glasses. Won't work. Hate men. They're bad frogs. Bad frog. For the life of me, I can't find it, and I don't know why. I think I was thinking in terms of the tree frog when I was doing this, but I could swear that there was some mention of venom. Maybe I'm wrong. So I've included this. Poison, DC 12, Constitution check or paralyzed for 1d4 rounds. The problem is I've not put a trigger, and I probably need to put in a trigger. Okay. Okay, DC 12 Constitution check if touched. If touched. I wanted it on its skin rather than its bite. So if touched. So if you touch the thing, like you punch it or you come in contact with it because you grab it or something like that, this is where it would this ability would kick in. So it's this. DC 12 Constitution check if touched or paralyzed 1d4 rounds. Okay. So maybe we'll do it the other way around. If touched, comma, DC 12 Constitution check or paralyzed. Yeah, that's probably better. It's going to be a bit easier to read, I think, eh? All right, and that is your Bullywug. So let's go and have a look at the chat and see what you guys have come up with. See if there's anything that you think that I have put in that shouldn't be there, or I've left anything out, and we'll work with that. Far hoppers, stats almost at level 1 rogue, but can hop as far as an action. Amphibious can breathe water. I don't think we need to mention that. It's not 5e. It's got a swim speed. I think we can just say it's amphibious. I think it's done most of the work there. Gator skin, leather. I suppose you could give it leathery skin rather than have it wearing the leather. But since traditionally the Bullywug did actually make its own type of leather that it would wear, I thought I would just... Maybe it kills gators and wears the gator skin as a leather armor. Like that. Maybe that's the thing. Yeah, gator skin leather. Oh, that's what you mean, Fred Hooper. Of course. Hello, Jeeves. Hi, Fred. I have to admit, I have always found Bullywugs a bit silly for my game, so I tend to avoid them. Totally understand. You don't use them. Just use the monsters that do work for you. D&D needs some silly bullfrogs. Yeah. Spear. Poison spear. They rub their spear on their back to poison it. I like the poison spear idea. So it looks like we're going with skin and the tip of the spear. Oh, things got really complicated now. So if I'm going to do that, I need to go here, which will be plus poison. So that's a very small adjustment. We're not going to make their bite poisonous. Since their skin is poisonous, doesn't mean that their bite is necessarily the poisonous aspect. The glands for releasing the poison are underneath the skin rather than in their mouth. But I mean, I guess you could make the argument that, you could be poisoned either way. I mean, there's probably nothing wrong with doing both. So this is how it kind of looks now. For those of you who are wondering, let's show you this. Since you've suggested let's add the poison to the spear, we have done so. Okay, so spear, 2 spears. If you're using melee, if you throw it, then you're only going to be able to throw it once. Plus 1, it's 1d6 plus poison. And the poison effect is down the bottom, so it's nice and simple. Okay, for those of you who need that. And I think that covers most of that. I think we've got all of the bits and pieces around that sorted. If I look at sort of like a spider, rat, plus poison, plus disease, spider, centipede, spider, giant snake, plus poison. Yep, no, that's the convention. That's how it should be structured. So there we go. I guess it's about now deciding whether we want it to be called the Toad Folk, since Bullywug, I'm pretty sure, is not part of the SRD, which is why Kelsey left it out of her core book for Shadowdark. So it's going to have to be called Toad Folk, or Swamp Hopper, or Toadies. What would be your preferred name for this thing? Which one is the one that stands out to you? And there we go. Oh, sorry people, making adjustments, but I think I got that right. Unarmed attacks versus the bumper frog are not recommended, yeah, and definitely don't eat them. I have had a group that wants to eat everything they killed. I believe that's happened to me more than a few times too. It's a natural part of playing any game. So I'm going to end this poll. We're going to be doing, I think it's the Pseudo Dragon next week. For those of you who are interested in the Pseudo Dragon, we'll make a Pseudo Dragon since there isn't one for Shadowdark. We'll make one for Shadowdark next week. And I'm going to just keep doing this all year. And into the new year, 2026, we'll see more of these being done. You're going to see a lot of system agnostic stuff being published by me, and some stuff that isn't system agnostic, something that's Shadowdark themed. But as I work my way through and try to fix 5e, Dungeons and Dragons 5e, I'm going to release, hopefully early 2026, the remastered backgrounds, and then remastered species, and then eventually the remastered classes, with a completely new system that does not use subclasses, multi-classing, and should give you the kind of flexibility that you want and still be reasonable. Eating a pseudo dragon causes a curse that is very hard to remove. Just made that up. Do you use Bullywugs in your game? Yes, 34%, not sure, 33%, and just watching, 33% out of 3 votes. Okay. All right, so tomorrow I'm talking about Daggerheart. I'm probably going to save these discussions about games I've played during this year to once a month, something like that, because I still got to do a lot of design work for 5e, and 5e is much harder to design for, so therefore I'm going to have to work a lot harder at it to get it done. And I hope to do so. It just takes a little bit more time. So yeah, we're going to be getting into back into backgrounds. We'll almost finish them, and then I'll put them forward to get worked on for publication, and go from there. Okay. Anyway, I think we've covered everything that we need to. I'm going to get out of here. Remember, you can go to my Patreon. The free tier gives you the table that shows you how to make Shadowdark monsters. The paid tier gives you that, and you also get all of the monsters that I make for Shadowdark as well in a PDF. Okay, all right. Thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening. Thanks for taking part in the poll if you did. Thank you to Fred, Huber, and Jeeves. I really do appreciate you commenting in chat. Thank you to all of my paid patrons. I do appreciate you. Without you, I couldn't keep doing this. I probably would just have to stop. And wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.